In this video, I'm going to be discussing dissonant intervals and how to use them in improvising. So in an octave, you have 12 notes, and each interval, each gap between two notes has a name like minor second, minor third, major third. Hopefully you know all that. If you don't, I've got a separate video that explains chords and intervals and how they work and stuff like that. But essentially in this video I just wanted to run through which intervals are considered consonant, that is sounding pleasant to the ear, and which intervals are considered dissonant, or ones that sound unpleasant to the ear. And I'll explain how you can use dissonant intervals in your improvising, essentially. Now, I suppose to give you a little bit of technical background, there are certain intervals that are considered perfect intervals, so like perfect unison, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, and perfect octave. Now, they're called octave because a long time ago someone decided that they sounded nice. That's essentially the layman's version explanation, that they sound pleasant to the ear. There is a technical explanation for it, which in this context isn't too important, but essentially it has to do with the interval ratio, or the ratio of the frequencies between the notes. So a perfect unison has a frequency ratio of 1 to 1, perfect octave has a ratio of 2 to 1, a perfect fifth has a ratio of 3 to 2, a perfect fourth has a ratio of 4 to 3, and sort of so on. But anyway, that's a little bit of an aside. Essentially, in this lesson, I'm going to lump all the possible intervals into three categories: those of perfect consonants, those of imperfect consonants, and those of dissonance. And then I'm going to explain to you how to use the dissonant intervals to create tension in your soloing. So let's begin. The perfect consonants are, as I said before, perfect unison, perfect octave, perfect fifth, and perfect fourth. The imperfect consonances, some people actually put the perfect fourth in the imperfect consonants bin, but I won't in this video for the sake of, I suppose, naming consistency. So in the imperfect consonants bucket or category, we'll put the major third, the minor third, the major sixth, and the minor sixth. Then we're left with the dissonant intervals, which are the minor second, major second, tritone, the minor seventh, and the major seventh. And then I'm going to throw one more in there on top of that, and that being the interval of a flat ninth, which is effectively a minor second but an octave apart. So that one's considered quite dissonant as well. So in the first video I made on improvisation in this little series of videos, I explained that jazz improvisation is about building tension and then resolving that tension. And I told you that you build tension by playing notes outside of the scale, and then you resolve that tension by playing notes inside the scale. So in the key of C major, let's again take a simple chord progression of a 2-5-1 in C major. You'd build tension by using notes outside of the key of C major, so all the black notes, all the sharps and flats. And then you would resolve it by coming back into the key of C major, so using the notes in the C major scale, the white notes. Now that's a good generalization, but it's not completely true. You can also build tension by using notes only within the C major scale, or inside the scale. And the way you do that is with dissonant intervals. So if I play something like... Right, so both notes that I was playing there are in the scale of C major, that is the E and the F. But by playing them together, I'm creating tension. That is, I'm making it dissonant, I'm making it sound jarring and unpleasant. Right, so I'm creating tension despite playing notes within the scale, inside the scale. Now that's a good way to begin practicing creating tension in your improvisation, because you don't have to muck around with notes outside of the scale and sort of think, oh, how do I play that? Where do I play it? Do I change key, or what's happening there? You can just continue playing in the C major scale, or the diatonic scale that you're in, but just use dissonant intervals to create stress. And the good thing about that is then they're really easy to resolve, because you can either just break the interval and just play one note, so resolve it up or down some other way. Right, and play around with ideas like that. So you can use all of the dissonant intervals that I showed you using only the notes within the C major scale or within the scale that you're in. So the minor second you can play there or there. The major second you can play across those notes. The tritone you can play between the F and the B. You can play the major seventh or the minor seventh, which is kind of like a shell chord. You're just playing the outer notes. But by sort of really hitting them and focusing on them, you can create a bit of tension and a bit of like a jarring noise that you create before resolving it to something. Hitting those two notes, even though those two same notes are in the chord that I was playing, still sounds a bit jarring, still sounds dissonant, and you can resolve it to any other note in the scale, though you should preferably target a guide tone. And this ties in nicely with the idea of avoid notes, which I covered in an earlier video. So essentially an avoid note is a note that creates a dissonant interval with a note in the chord that you're playing. So for example, on the C major 7, an avoid note is the F because it creates an interval of a flat ninth between the E and the F. And so you can also build tension in that way. Whereas in the avoid note video I said you generally want to avoid the avoid note or not really sit on it, use it as a passing note moving through it. If you want to create tension, if you want to create a bit of a jarring sound, you can sit on the avoid note. As long as you're doing it intentionally and not by accident, which I suppose is the difference between it being a mistake and being jazz improvisation. So on the C major 7 you can just sit on the F and then you can resolve it to a guide tone, which is really strong and good. Right, that's a melody with a little bit more going on in it, that sort of targeted the F, the avoid note, and then resolved to the E, which is a guide tone of the C major 7. Right, so those are the type of ideas you can use when creating tension, but still staying within this, the key that you're in, inside the key, inside the scale. Cool, so that's all I really wanted to cover. Feel free to leave any questions or comments, and thanks for watching. See ya.